The Falcons are looking to add competition behind Kirk Cousins at quarterback, but will they draft one that will be considered his heir apparent?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And of course, I've been covering the Falcons for so long, for nearly 20 years, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer that tunes in each and every day as your first listen or first watch of the day. And to become an everydayer, all you got to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. So today's episode, I am joined by someone else who has been covering the Falcons for a very long time. That is Dave Choate of the Falcoholic, and we're going to talk about Raheem Morris's comments at the owners' meetings, talk about free agency so far, the Falcons draft plans, as well as players that will be making potential jumps in years 2 and 3 here in Atlanta. And so without further ado, let's jump into that conversation right now with Dave Choate of the Falcoholic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another illustrious guest. He is none other than Dave Choate, the founder of the Falcoholic. He is the Falcoholic himself, the head honcho, the big kahuna, whatever you want to call him, over at the Falcoholic, a website that I occasionally write for. Probably need to write something this offseason about Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, offseason moves so far. But, Dave's a good boss, right? He doesn't pressure me too much on that. But Dave, my friend, welcome to Locked On Falcons.
It's good to be back.
So we are recording this Tuesday, and the NFL owners' meetings are going strong in Orlando this week. And we got to hear from both Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot. And Raheem Morris said some things this morning that, were pretty interesting. He talked about sort of the open competition that may be at the backup quarterback position behind Kirk Cousins with Taylor Heinicke in a quarterback to be named later. He talked about why the Falcons went after Kirk Cousins. He talked about the team's belief that they could potentially add, pieces in the secondary in the upcoming draft, as well as the pass rush, where the Falcons potentially have 2 or 3 starters, vacancies on the defensive side of the ball. Talked a little bit about bringing back Calais Campbell. So, Dave, I give you the floor, and which of these sort of talking points did sort of jumped out to you as the most interesting one that we can sort of start today's conversation about?
I think I was the most interested. The Campbell piece was really cool because we had no idea if the team had actually been talking to him. We're still interested in bringing him back. But I think the most substantive thing for me was the quarterback mentioned. The fact that they got to go back, reevaluate their draft options now that they know that they have Cousins and they have Heinicke around. But to me, I thought that, if Heinicke was a lock to be your QB2, they probably would have restructured his deal to try to free up some cap space, knowing he's going to be here this year. Maybe it makes it a little bit trickier to cut him next year, but you worry about that next year. The fact that they haven't touched his contract, and Raheem Morris is saying they're definitely adding another quarterback and alluding to maybe looking at the draft to do so, tells me he's not locked in, right? You can still... His roster bonus has landed, so you take away a little bit of the money you can claw back. But there is a world in which Heinicke is not your backup quarterback this year. It is a rookie, which is something that I've kind of been hoping for. I think I've been pretty open about that. And you can still cut him and realize some cap relief. So hearing him bring that up was interesting to me, to know that, I think the working assumption was, when that deadline passed for the bonus, that, okay, Heinicke's here. This kind of takes them out of the running, and I don't think that's close to reality. I think we are going to have either a genuine competition, or Heinicke is going to just be supplanted by a rookie quarterback. And to me, again, that is interesting, because I don't know if you have Cousins past the next couple of years. I don't know how things are going to play out, but certainly there is a way to escape the contract at that point. So having a young guy in the wings would be a nice change of pace for this team.
Okay, well, they did have a young guy in the wings, and they traded him to Arizona Cardinals, but
yeah.
Obviously that didn't work out. I'm not as optimistic as you that a rookie is going to be a serious threat for Taylor Heinicke's job, but I would love to see it. But anybody who listens to this podcast knows like I'm not the world's biggest fan of Taylor Heinicke as a quarterback, as a backup quarterback. But we'll see what happens. I think this, as you say, the Falcons definitely want to draft a quarterback. They probably will, but it remains to be seen who they get and whether or not that guy is going to be good enough to really give Taylor Heinicke a serious run for his money. Because, I think a lot of people are assuming, we'll get a quarterback in like the second round or something like that. And it's like, they might not get a quarterback to like the sixth round. And in that situation, I don't think, Taylor Heinicke is going anywhere, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. If it's not the second day, which has been sort of where I'm assuming they might look, then yeah, you're probably not picking somebody out of, another guy out of Old Dominion in the sixth round and asking him to unseat Heinicke. I think that's a fair take on that. So I guess we'll know when we get there, right?
Yeah,
at least they've got some flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. So all things are on the table, and including are the Falcons going into this draft looking to add multiple starters on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get into that, as well as talk with Dave about his thoughts on the offseason move so far, including Kirk Cousins, including all the speed that the team has added at the wide receiver position. We'll break that down as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel is going to let you bet on every game of this year's NCAA tournament, whether you're betting on that big upset or you're just going to ride that one seed all the way to the Final Four. It's time to go dancing, ladies and gentlemen, with America's #1 sportsbook. That's right, FanDuel. And new customers on FanDuel get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. And whether you're into March Madness or you just want to bet on NHL, NBA, NFL draft props, FanDuel has it all. And all you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can bet on all your favorite sports or some of your least favorite sports, but you can especially bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. So here with Dave Choate of the Falcoholic, and of course we're talking about the Falcons offseason moves. And before we get into that, guys, I just want to plug the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel here on YouTube for free, giving you the can't miss analysis, opinions, news 24/7 streaming on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Check out the Locked On Sports Atlanta 24/7 streaming channel here on YouTube, as well as Amazon Fire TV. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So here with Dave Choate, Falcoholic. I want to talk with you about the Falcons' seeming draft plan. We talked about the potential for them to get a quarterback. It does feel like they have potentially 3 starting spots open on the defensive side of the ball, in particular, in terms of outside linebacker opposite presumably Arnold Ebiketie or Lorenzo Carter. I don't know who you're penciling in to be one of those starters. The cornerback spot opposite AJ Terrell. I don't know if you're penciling in Clark Phillips or Mike Hughes for that spot. And the safety spot opposite JC Bates. And again, don't know if you're penciling Richie Grant or DeMarco Helms. Do you feel like, the Falcons can approach this draft with the idea that, and that's part of the reason why, I'm a little skeptical about them getting that quarterback on day 2, because if you want to get guys that can start for your team at those 3 spots, it feels like you're kind of pressured to go 1, 2, 3 at the top of your draft in addressing some of those needs in rounds 1, 2, and 3. Do you feel like the Falcons, that's an achievable dream for the Falcons for them? Or do you think some or one of those players that I mentioned that are sort of incumbents could potentially step up and fill one of those vacancies and allow the Falcons to go in other directions in their upcoming draft?
Yeah, I think it would be out of character for Terry Fontenot, I think, to go into this draft being like, okay, we need 3 high-end defensive starters or we're screwed, which you can argue that's kind of where they are right now. It's certainly true at outside linebacker. So I expect them to have one internal guy. I would bet on either, Phillips or Grant. I think Richie Grant is not a popular man in the fan base for understandable reasons, especially over the last couple of seasons, but he's still a guy that I can see this team being like, all right, new coaching staff, new opportunity. We still like the talent. Let's see what he can do. And I am a self-proclaimed Clark Phillips fan, so I'll go to bat for him and say I'm penciling him in opposite AJ Terrell. So I do think they'll have 1 or 2 of those spots ready to fill internally, and they're still going to pick up somebody at outside linebacker. I feel like the need is so acute. They've been linked to some bigger names and obviously haven't gotten the job done. So I think they'll fill that somehow with a decent option between now and the draft. I think the idea again will be to not go in there knowing that you have to get these 3 defensive starters. Do they need still? Could they draft 3 at that point, even after they add some folks, even if they have the internal option? Sure, but I do think that they'll go into it not needing to go 1, 2, 3 in order to put a good defense on the field this year.
Okay. Let's circle back to the offseason moves so far. Obviously, the Falcons have focused primarily on revamping their offense, adding a quarterback, adding a blocking tight end, and adding 3 receivers, weapons, whatever you want to call them, at that position. And just picking your brain, Dave, do you feel like, obviously you just suggested that, there are potentially more moves on the horizon between now and the draft, but what are your thoughts on those moves so far? And do you feel like the Falcons have done enough on that side of the ball to feel pretty good moving forward there?
I think they've done probably enough. I worry a little bit about the depth at a couple spots. I think Storm Norton to me is a perfectly fine swing tackle. I think he did a nice job last year, so getting him back was important. But the depth on the interior of the line, I worry a little bit about that. I kind of wonder what happens at tight end after Pitts and Warner. But overall, I think that they're pretty close to where they want to be at this point. You could certainly get another receiver in the draft if there's somebody you really like. It's a good class, but I think they addressed personnel wise, and then with the changeover in the coaching staff with Zach Robinson, with the type of system he's going to try to run, I think they've done a nice job of tackling all their needs. I think you can put that Falcons offense on the field today and feel pretty good that it's a good offense. So whether Cousins is going to be 100% healthy, whether Mooney and Moore are going to have increased production in this offense with a different opportunity, change of scenery, we don't know that. But I do think putting a baseline on it, if everybody's healthy, it's a good offense. And I think they attacked it early with most of their free agent dollars because they viewed it as the biggest problem area on the team. I think they'll be a little bit more, I don't want to say lax about the defense, because again, you've got to use the draft. I think there will be some moves in between now and then, but they feel a little bit better about the foundation than they did on the offensive side of the ball. Now you've got the quarterback. Now you've added tremendous speed. You've upgraded your blocking at tight end, and you still have the stars you already had. You have Pitts, you had London, you have Bijan, and then you have Tyler Algier as well, who I think is still a really useful player. So I really think just in the couple of days that they took to put the thing together, and I've been hesitating about this, trying not to say fix the offense, because I know that's going to come back and bite me at some point. But it does feel like they've done that. It feels like all of the moves they've made have made it possible to put a quality passing attack out there, which is something they just did not have a year ago for more than a quarter at a time.
Okay. Now, later in the episode, we're going to talk about players that are capable of making that year 2 or year 3 jump. I feel like some of your thoughts on, Clark Phillips and others may preview sort of maybe your answers to that. But before we get there, I do want to ask you briefly on sort of what were your thoughts on Raheem Morris commenting on Calais Campbell? Do you feel like the odds shot up that Campbell will be back in Atlanta? Or, is this, Raheem Morris saying the things that he's supposed to say about a player of Calais Campbell's caliber, and ultimately it will just boil down to whatever Calais Campbell wants to do in terms of that. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it does come down to Calais Campbell doing what Calais Campbell wants to do, right? Ultimately, to me, if Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot were able to sell Campbell on last year's team, to me, this year's team should also be a fairly good sell for Campbell. I expect the defense to be pretty young, so he has that opportunity again to be that veteran presence and a player who will get playing time. I don't think they're going to be able to add up front to the extent that, he would be a nominal part of the rotation at best. And I think, Raheem Morris, just reputationally, from everything we know about him, is the kind of coach that I feel like Campbell would like to play for. So I think if, Morris is serious about, hey, this is the vision, this is what we want to do, we'd like you to be here again as that veteran presence and as a useful part of our front. Like, to me, I don't think things have changed so much or that the picture has gotten bleaker for Campbell here in Atlanta. If he enjoyed his time, he enjoyed playing with these guys, I imagine he'll be back. I just don't know if it's now or if it ends up happening in May, June, post-draft.
Definitely. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I know a big selling point for Campbell last year was Ryan Nielsen in the role in that scheme. And obviously that will change. And whether or not Campbell is open to that, I think will probably be a big deciding factor in terms of whether or not he wants to come back to Atlanta. Because as you say, I think the sort of situation around him is probably much better in Atlanta in 2024 than it was in 2023. But at the same time, if he doesn't feel like the new defensive scheme is going to maximize him over, what could be the last year of his NFL career, then that will be also a factor in deciding that. So we'll see what happens with Calais Campbell. There hasn't been really any news on that front. Obviously, I'm sure he's going to take his time, and as he should, as a 74-year-old NFL football player, like why go through OTAs if you don't have to at this point in time at the stage of your career. But that being said, let's talk about some of the young guys that we will be seeing in OTAs later this offseason, and some of those guys and whether or not they will be making, which players are going to be making the biggest jump from year 1 to year 2, as well as year 2 to year 3. And we'll continue that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons here with Dave Choate of the Falcoholic. And guys, I want to tell you that Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, comedy, music, theater near you. They have killer last minute deals that you can buy tickets in seconds right up to the start of an event. All in prices mean you don't have to worry about hidden fees. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And they also have Game Time's guarantee. You'll always get the best price. It means if you can find tickets in the same section and row for less, they will credit you 110% the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we are wrapping up today's episode here with Dave Choate of the Falcoholic, the head honcho himself. And this question comes from Ricardo F., one of the Locked On Falcons insiders. And those of you that want to get priority on future mailbags and Q&As, you can become a Locked On Falcons insider by hitting the link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. You get 14-day free trial. Then it's $4.99 a month after that. And not only do you get priority for future mailbags and Q&As, you also get access to all the film breakdowns that I do on a near weekly basis, most recently breaking down the 5 new faces on the Falcons offense that they've added so far in free agency, looking at their film from the last couple of seasons. So go check that out at the link in the description below. But Ricardo asks, Who do you anticipate will have the largest jump in impact going from year 1 to year 2? And the same question for year 2 to year 3. So, Dave, I give you the floor. Who do you think those players will be?
Yeah, so I'm going to surprise you and not say Clark Phillips, even though I really want to. I think it's going to be Matthew Bergeron. I think maybe he's a little bit of an obvious choice, but it was an up and down rookie season for him. I thought he acquitted himself pretty well. The fact that he was available for basically every snap was a big deal for a team that needed that with the injuries. But I think he is a genuine talent, and I think he's a player that we should expect with another year of comfort, and hopefully with a better offense in general around him. I expect to see a significant leap from him, to be the caliber of player I think he can be, which is an above average left guard in the NFL, and that's sort of the floor for me. But it helps that again his rookie season was not anything spectacular, so hopefully that'll be the case. For the third year player, again, probably an obvious choice, but I'm looking at Drake London. I think you look at the situation, he has been a reliable and I think very tantalizing player, for his skill set the last 2 years, even though the quarterback play has been really inconsistent. So having somebody like Cousins, who I think will enjoy having him as this, big target, big threat, and having some of the pressure taken off of him, hopefully by some of the weapons they've added, I think will make for a true breakout year for him. 1,000-yard plus season, so long as he's healthy. And it's sort of a big leap, not only in production, but here in year 3, where I kind of expect, players like him to start piecing it together. I do think he'll have that kind of breakout.
Yeah, I think those are fair. You obviously you can answer this question in multiple ways. I tend to agree with you on Bergeron from the standpoint that I think it needs to be Matthew Bergeron in terms of the jump that he makes. Like I'm not as high on Bergeron after his rookie season as maybe other people are, including yourself. I thought he was fine. We've seen a lot worse from rookie left guards. So I feel
Recently,
like
yeah.
I feel like that also gives him a bump. But I do feel like if this run game is going to get on back on track, like Bergeron's going to have to be significantly better. And I thought that was a strength of his at Syracuse, and it didn't really manifest itself on the field in year 1. So I'm hoping that we'll see it in year 2. Obviously, you could have a massive jump from players like Clark Phillips if he's a starter, DeMarco Hellams if he's a starter. Of course, Bijan Robinson. I think a lot of people saw what we saw a lot of good from Bijan, but like imagine if he could be 50% better, and what type of year that could mean for him and whatnot. And I think for the year 3 guys, like again, a lot of these guys, I think Drake London is an excellent choice, especially depending on if it's very clear that he's the go-to weapon in this offense at the wide receiver position, which at least based off of the roster constructed as it is constructed right now, no offense to Darnell Mooney and Rondell Moore and Ray McLeod and Kadero Hodge, but I think right now, if the Falcons had to play a game this weekend, like Drake London's getting like 15 targets in that game, and,
Yeah.
and it needs to be that way. So, I think he's a good choice. But another player that I think kind of needs to have a big breakout year is Troy Anderson, just because we haven't really seen what Troy Anderson can do. We've seen flashes of Troy Anderson's potential, but he only played 2.5 games last year. And like last year was supposed to be kind of his like figure it out season as he sort of went through the ups and downs of playing a full season and seeing what he is. And now you're going to need that from him this year. But I don't know if the Falcons now at this point with, the expectations being raised, can they have a year where Troy Anderson just kind of figures it out? He kind of, working through that stage. I think you have to kind of leapfrog that stage and get to the point where he's already figured it out. And that's going to be difficult given that he hasn't really played all that much. But obviously you could pick Arnold Ebiketie. You can pick, D'Angelo Malone as a player. I know he's a player that a lot of people are hoping to see a lot more of this upcoming season as well. So a lot of names in the mix there for these, year 2 and year 3 breakouts. And, I think the year 2 breakout is something I talk about constantly on the podcast. Like the jump that a guy makes from year 1 to year 2, to me, often is going to tell you whether or not this guy's going to be for real in the NFL, right? If you you look at two examples, like Ade Ogundeji didn't really do a whole lot from year 1 to year 2. But then you look at, I know Richie Grant hasn't necessarily. I'm trying to think of Drew Dahlman. Drew Dahlman would be a better example of that. Drew Dahlman making his jump from year 1 to year 2, and you saw a lot of progress there. And so, Drew Dahlman may wind up being the Falcons starting center for the next 5 years. That's on the table now, as opposed to Ade Ogundeji, who's probably on the roster bubble and likely to be cut, this summer, because a lot of people thought he would get cut last summer. So I think that big jump is going to be important for a lot of these guys, and we'll obviously keep an eye on that as the offseason unfolds. But Dave, let the people know what are some of the things that are coming their way on the Falcoholic as the offseason unfolds, and maybe one or two of those things might be an article by yours truly.
Yeah. Besides that, which I would tease because always great stuff from you, of course. I think we're going to be shifting to the draft in lieu of anything else to talk about lately. When Raheem Morris was talking this morning, I was very excited because it felt like nothing had happened with the Falcons for a solid week. So we'll be talking about that. I have a piece coming up a little bit later this week just about how we can expect the rest of this offseason to unfold, whether it's, we are going to see some restructures and signings, or we're just going to go into the draft with a couple small signings and we'll figure everything else out over the summer, which I'm sort of leaning toward. And then, of course, look for Kevin Knight's mock drafts, a lot of scouting reports from Will McFadden, Kevin, and the team. And we'll just get psyched for whatever's to come in the draft and picking 8th for the 3rd time in 4 years. I'm hoping it's the last time for real that we have to see that for a while, even though I'm excited to see who they get.
Absolutely. So looking forward to all of that. Guys, that's going to do it for us here. We'll be back tomorrow with something else. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about the new kickoff rule and how that's going to impact, training camp competitions or something along those lines. So check that out as your first listen. Check out Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On Sports Today. Their streaming channels. Check out Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft, Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. All of that is all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.